Heartbreaking scene. Girl begs in trash for food until millionaire steps in at midnight in the dark alleys of the city, where shadows whispered secrets of despair. A girl knelt among the remnants of discarded dreams. Her hands, trembling and filthy, rummaged through a stinking pile of refuse. The moon hung like a watchful eye, casting a pale light on her gaunt face, sunken cheeks, and desperate eyes. It was just past midnight, and the streetlights flickered like dying stars. The air was thick with the smell of rot and hopelessness, but all she could think about was the gnawing ache in her stomach. With each trash bag she tore open, another flicker of hope dimmed. She found remnants, moldy bread, and half-eaten apples, not enough to fill her hollow frame, but it was all she had. It was a grim dance of survival, and a heart-wrenching scene unfolding in the gutter of society. The city breathed indifference, with cars roaring past and people too consumed in their lives to notice the tragedy unfolding just a few feet away. Suddenly she heard footsteps, heavy, purposeful. Her heart raced, and she pressed herself further into the shadows. What if it was someone looking to bully her? Or worse, someone wanting to take what little she had left? The tension in the air prickled her skin. Yet when she peeked out, she caught sight of a figure shrouded in mystery. A man in an expensive suit, a contrast to the refuse that surrounded her. His face was hidden under the brim of a wide hat, a silhouette against the flickering streetlight, almost surreal. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. She watched as he hesitated, then bent down with a shimmering glint in his hand. Was it money? A ring? Whatever it was, he held it out toward her, and for a split second, hope coursed through her veins. The air crackled with anticipation. Could he be a savior? Or was this some cruel trick? She could hardly breathe, her chest tightening, a lump forming in her throat. Here, he said softly, his voice like velvet, laced with concern. Take it. But just as she reached out, a siren wailed in the distance, a cold reminder of her reality. The man's eyes darted, fear flashing across his face, and he pulled his hand back, leaving her feeling as empty as the trash surrounding her. What was this man doing there at such a late hour? What drove him to that dark alley? The questions hung heavy in the air as silence enveloped them, thick like fog. Just then, sirens closed in, blaring like a warning. Who could help her? Who could save them both? The sirens grew louder, closing in fast. The girl's heart thumped violently, a drumbeat of panic reverberating in her chest. The man's gaze flickered between her and the mouth of the alley as shadows crept closer. She felt the weight of his uncertainty, the tension crackling in the air like a live wire. What was he afraid of? Suddenly, without warning, he shoved the item he held toward her, a small, shiny key. It slipped through his fingers and landed in the strewn trash. The girl froze. A key? To what? Curiosity churned within her, battling with her instinct to retreat. Please take it, he urged, his voice a low whisper, strained as if he struggled against fear. But she could only stare, caught up in the flicker of the moment, mouth agape, unsure if this was a chance or a trap. Why? She finally blurted out, her voice barely above a breath. Why are you helping me? He stepped a bit closer, though the sirens blared ever nearer. I've seen too much. Too many people suffering in silence. His dark eyes were intense, searching hers for understanding. He hesitated, looking back toward the street, where flashing lights painted the walls in a frantic dance. His urgency seeped into her skin, igniting the most primal of instincts, survival. With a shaky hand, she reached into the refuse, fingers brushing against the filth and grime as she fumbled to lift the key from its resting place. It felt cold and heavy in her palm, an object dwelled with possibility, and yet the hints of danger loomed ominously. Listen to me, he interrupted her thoughts, his voice dropping to a near hiss, urgency spilling out. You have to trust me. It's not safe here. If they see you, he cut off abruptly, as if the very thought were too terrible to articulate. Before she could respond, the wail of the sirens amplified. Several police cars rounded the corner, lights flashing like anxious fireflies. Her breath quickened, adrenaline pulsing through her veins. She could feel it already, the fight or flight response clawing at her mind. The man took a step back, half-turned toward the street, his resolve wavering. You need to hide then, as if the shadows had conspired, crumpling out of nowhere. Heavy boots crushed empty cans behind them. A group of figures loomed into view, faces hardened, eyes scanning the alley with predatory intent. Roughnecks, drawn to vulnerability like moths to a flame. Get down! He shouted, but it was too late. The girl froze, heart pounding in her ears, terror amplifying her senses. The men moved closer, their laughter echoing off the walls, a cruel soundtrack to her nightmare. Panic set and the key slipped from her fingers, clattering against the pavement. Run! The man's voice twisted in urgency, but where to run? There was nowhere to hide in the open. Torn between defiance and fear, she glanced back at him. A spark of something flickered in his eyes, a mix of desperation and determination. In the chaos, she realized something, and the truth felt like venom in her throat. But before she could act, the first of the men lunged forward, a sinister smile crawling across his face. The alley narrowed, and every heartbeat pounded with uncertainty. Just as his hand reached out, a blinding light illuminated the space, scattering shadows everywhere. What followed next was a blur of sirens, shouts, and chaos. The world spun, and suddenly everything shifted. And then she vanished into the darkness, the man's shout echoing behind her. What had she gotten herself into? What secrets would unveil in the following chase, and would either of them escape this torment? The night was far from over. The darkness swallowed her whole. She dashed into the shadows, heart racing, breathless. The echoes of chaos faded behind her as she darted past tight rows of dumpsters and towering brick walls. She had no plan, no destination, but the instinct to survive propelled her forward. Stumbling onto a deserted street, the girl glanced over her shoulder, half expecting to see the man or those men from the alley pursue her. But only the distant howls of the sirens haunted the air. They'd be caught up, no doubt, but it wasn't her that they were looking for. Yet. She pressed against the cool brick, palms clammy and shaking. Should she hide? Or keep moving? Every rustle seemed to pull the dread tighter in her chest. Her eyes searched for a place to disappear, but everything felt too exposed. A flicker of light caught her attention, a neon sign flickering sporadically, promising warmth and company. It was a diner. With a deep breath, she made her way toward it, slipping through the door like a whisper. The aroma of coffee and greasy food enveloped her, and the clatter of dishes filled the air. A few couples sat in booths, immersed in their conversations, oblivious to the storm that had just ripped through her reality. She took a seat in the far corner, legs trembling beneath her. She couldn't stay too long. The memory of the lives she'd left behind weighed down on her, mixing with the richness of the smell in a sickening haze. But there was something about the laughter, the hum of comfort in that small space, that drew her in, if only for a moment. Can I help you? The voice was kind, belonging to a waitress with tired eyes and an even more tired smile. The girl hesitated, words lingering on the tip of her tongue. Just some water, please. The waitress nodded, moving away, and the girl's heart sank again. How easy it was to feel normal, even for a split second. The clink of silverware and the soft chatter of patrons mixed together like a melodic background that drowned out her panic. But her calm shattered as the door swung open. A gust of cold wind rushed in, and she instinctively turned. The glare of headlights flooded the diner for a brief moment before the door clicked shut. Her breath caught. A figure stepped inside, tall and familiar, the man from the alley, looking haggard and intense. Their eyes locked, and the charged silence screamed all the words they didn't say. For a heartbeat, time suspended. Then, the memory of shadowy figures surged back. He wasn't there to rescue her, they both knew that. She bolted upright and backed toward the kitchen, her instincts screaming to flee again. Wait! His voice broke through the chatter. Please! She hesitated, heart thrumming like a wild drum. It was a dangerous choice. But who could she trust? Then, like a thunderstorm rolling in, the air thickened. A group stepped through the diner door, faces twisted in anger and eyes wild. The men from the alley. The girl felt completely trapped now, frozen in dread. Don't let her escape. One of them shouted, scanning the room. She has something that belongs to us. The waitress gasped, looking from her to the men, confusion written all over her face. Panic surged, the urgency clawing at her throat. She glanced back at the man, who stood firmly in her way, blocking her path. We need to get out of here, he insisted, his voice firm. But just as she opened her mouth to respond, the diner door swung open again. In walked a figure dressed in black, sweeping the room with a chilling gaze. This time, the threat was more than just the roughnecks. Time's up, the newcomer declared coolly, their voice slicing through the tension. What had she gotten herself into? The key felt heavier in her pocket, a puzzle she couldn't yet fathom. As chaos brewed all around, she knew one thing: she had to make a decision, and it couldn't wait. What lay beyond the door? Was there a way out, or would they all be ensnared in the web of danger closing in? The night was far from over, and the darkness held secrets waiting to be unveiled. The air crackled with tension, thick and suffocating. The girl's mind raced. She glanced between the man from the alley and the newcomers who surged with anger and menace. A part of her wanted to trust him, that flicker of hope igniting from his presence. She thought about the weight of the key nestled against her thigh, a burden, a promise, a potential life on the other side of this nightmare. Stay calm, the man said, his voice low but fierce. He held up his hands in a placating gesture. The ruffians were advancing, slowly but surely, sizing her up like prey. She's ours, and you're in our way, another man shouted, stepping forward, spittle dotting his lips. Move aside or face the consequences. The girl's heart leaped to her throat. She wanted to scream, to bolt, to claw her way out of this hell. The clinking of silverware rose and fell, patrons glancing nervously between the tables. Pure panic surged, electrifying her veins, urging her to run. Not going anywhere, the man in black replied, his tone dripping with disdain. You don't even know what you're chasing. What do you know? One of the roughnecks shot back, fists clenching tightly at his sides. You're just as much in the dark as she is. Maybe you should listen before making a mistake that you can't come back from. The confidence in the man's voice was solid, yet his eyes darted toward the back exit. It was a split-second decision. She could break right, but there was no guarantee of escape. It felt like the world wrapped tighter around her, leaving no room for air. Desperation clawed at her, making her dizzy. What do you want from me? She shouted, her voice shaking. The men stopped, surprised at her sudden outburst. Enough games. The key, girl. Hand it over. The leader's voice thundered, filled with a wild anger that sent chills down her spine. The key. The weight of it was suffocating. The girl clutched her pocket tighter, her fingers wrapping around the cold metal, uncertain of the power it held to protect or to damn her. Run! The man from the alley urged, his eyes pleading. The moment felt suspended, frozen like a photograph in a gallery of despair. Just as the girl took a step toward the back, the lights flickered, plunging the diner into a half-darkness, a strobe of flickering confusion. Shouts erupted all around. The noise was a cacophony, making it impossible to think clearly. Get her! Someone screamed. Chairs were knocked over, glass shattered, the world collapsing into chaos. She didn't need any more prompting. In that moment, instinct overruled thought. She slipped through the doorway leading to the kitchen, heart pounding like a relentless drum. Behind her, the chaos grew louder, a crash, a scream, and then silence as if the world held its breath. But her reprieve was short-lived. As she rounded a corner, she collided with a cart piled high with dirty dishes, sending them tumbling everywhere. The sound echoed like thunder. Stop her! The voice from outside the kitchen boomed. Footsteps thundered toward her, and she bolted again, desperation driving her as fear wrapped its icy fingers around her throat. The kitchen was a maze of machinery and darkness, cold steel mixing with the heat of the grill. She spotted a door marked exit, light spilling from its edges. Freedom, almost within reach. Suddenly, from behind, a hand seized her shoulder. A jolt of terror surged through her, but when she turned, it was him, the man from the alley. "You can't go there!" They yelled, but she pushed past him, adrenaline kicking in as she burst through the door. Outside, the night air hit her like a wave. She faced an empty street, moonlight illuminating her path. But just as she thought she could escape into the shadows, she heard footsteps pounding behind her, and caught a glimpse of the man in black moving toward her. This wasn't over. What awaited her beyond the door? Was the street a wider trap, or the pathway to salvation? Every heartbeat screamed for her to run, but in the quiet pulse of the night, a sinking realization gnawed at her. She might have just stepped deeper into a fight she couldn't comprehend. What had she truly unleashed? Time slipped through her fingers like grains of sand, and fear settled back, heavier than ever. The night was far from over, and the darkness had only begun to stir. The moon hung high, casting an eerie glow over the empty street. The girl's legs felt like lead, but fear propelling her surged with electric strength. She sprinted, her breath coming in short gasps, the sound of her pounding heart booming in her ears. Behind her, the footsteps grew louder, shouts shrieking like knives in the dark. She didn't dare look back, certain the men were right behind her, their faces twisted with fury. She dove into an alley, the shadows swallowing her whole. The alley stank of garbage and despair, but it was her only refuge. Chest heaving, she pressed her back against the cold wall of a building, straining to listen. The chaos from the diner faded, replaced by the distant hum of the city. She held the key tightly, feeling its cold metal against her palm. What was it truly for? Escape or a trap to pull her deeper into the nightmare? Where did she go? A voice echoed nearby, crackling with anger. Panic surged anew. They were close, so close. She squeezed herself down, hiding behind a stack of discarded crates. The world around her flickered in the dim light. Her mind raced, images flashing of the man in black standing firm against the ruffians. He had tried to help her, but had she just put him in danger? "They're not just after you," he had yelled. But what did that mean? What larger danger was she entangled in? Every breath felt louder, like a siren blaring in the night. Then came the tremor of footsteps approaching her hiding place. Shadows danced, twisting into monstrous shapes. The girl held her breath, biting her lip until she tasted salt. A rough hand swept across her hiding spot. She stifled a gasp as the man in black stepped around the corner. His eyes darted about, searching. Relief crashed over her, but just as she felt him close, the furious voice returned, echoing behind him, "This way. She can't be far." He turned, sensing the danger, and the urgency of his expression ignited her fear. "You need to move. They'll find you." She wanted to answer, to show she wasn't a burden weighing him down, but the words stuck in her throat. Without thinking, she bolted from the crates, racing towards him. "Can we escape?" she whispered, desperation lacing her voice. He nodded, grabbing her hand with a fierce grip. Together, they darted through the alley, weaving past the debris, adrenaline coursing through their veins. Heart pounding, she spared a glance back and caught sight of her pursuers bursting into the alley, shouting her name. Then, without warning, she stumbled, her foot catching on a loose brick. She fell hard to the ground, pain shooting through her ankle like electricity. "Get up!" he urged, panic weaving through his command. He crouched beside her, eyes frantic. "I can't," she gasped, the tears blurring her vision. Everything felt so heavy, so hopeless. But in that moment, something sparked inside her, something fierce, something willing to fight. "Listen to me," he insisted, his voice calm but urgent. "They're not just here for you. There's something bigger, and I need your help." Before she could question, he pulled her to her feet, wrapping an arm around her waist for support. Together they hurried down the alley, the sounds of chaos echoing behind, mixing with her gasping breaths. Just keep moving, I promise. I won't let them take you. But could she trust him? Did it matter? The night was closing in like a thick fog, each moment more suffocating than the last, each step drawing them deeper into uncertainty. Around them, shadows lurked and danger whispered. She felt the weight of the key hanging between them, a silent testament to the choices yet to be made. Suddenly, a glimmer caught her eye, a door, slightly ajar, illuminated by flickering light. Hope and fear battled inside her chest. Was this the escape they desperately needed, or another trap waiting to spring? As they reached for the door, a thunderous crash resonated behind them, a chilling reminder that they were far from safe. Would this next step lead them to safety, or plunge them into an even darker abyss? In that moment, she knew the real test was just beginning. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room that smelled of oil and dust, a stark contrast to the outside chaos. The flickering light bulb dangled above, casting erratic shadows that danced against the walls. The girl hesitated for a heartbeat, contemplating the safety this door might offer against the pursuers, but also fearing what lay beyond it. "Come on!" the man in black urged, pulling her shoulder gently but urgently. His grip showed a mix of fear and determination that spurred her on. They slipped inside, and he quickly shut the door, pressing his back against it, ears straining for the sounds outside. The girl stood beside him, keeping her weight off her injured ankle, her breath shallow and quick. "What now?" she breathed, her heart racing with uncertainty. "We need to hide, stay quiet," he whispered, scanning the room for any possible retreat. The place was cluttered with old machinery and forgotten items, cogs, rusted metal scraps, and dusty tarps that loomed like ghosts in the corners. But it was their only option. He steered her toward a stack of crates pushed against the wall. They squeezed behind them, the wood rough against her skin, but it felt safer than being out in the open. The footsteps outside faded momentarily, replaced by their heavy breathing in the cramped space. "They'll pass, they have to," he murmured, a lie meant to comfort. She glanced up at him, trying to read his expression. Was he as frightened as she was? Or was he hiding something? "Who are they?" she finally dared to ask. "More like what?" he replied, eyes fixed ahead, muscles tense. "They want something that goes beyond just you. And the key you're holding," he paused, hesitating before continuing with urgency, "it's connected to it all." Her heart raced. "What do you mean? What is it supposed to unlock?" He opened his mouth but was cut off by a sharp crash from the door they had just entered. Her stomach dropped. The men outside were close again. There was no mistaking the sound of something heavy hitting the floor. "Look, I'll handle this. But you need to promise me something," he said, his intensity locking onto her. "When I say run, you run? Don't stop until you get to the end of the street." Fear twisted in her chest. "What will you do?" "Just trust me," he replied, but the sincerity in his eyes was cut short by another violent slam against the door. Her mind raced through possibilities. Why did she feel so tied to this man? And was it really trust, or simply the weight of desperation that kept her near him? As the men shouted outside, she couldn't escape the thought that each moment pressed her down further into a world she didn't understand. Would they take him? What would happen to her if they did? Suddenly, the door burst open, splintering with force that echoed like thunder, lights spilling into the darkened room. The ruffians flooded in, faces twisted in rage, and the girl's breath caught in her throat. "Get them!" One spat, eyes darting around. The man in black moved before she could think. He lunged, meeting the first attacker with a fierce energy that surprised her. "Run!" he shouted without looking, as if this was all he ever asked of her. Her heart pounded with fear and instinct. She had to obey. Pushing past her fear, she bolted from behind the crates, adrenaline surging once more. She sprinted down the darkened corridor leading from the room, not daring to look back. The sound of chaos erupted behind her, flesh meeting flesh, a symphony of violence as she fled. She didn't slow. But just as she approached another exit, despair clawed at her. The key dangled in her hand. What was it worth now? All she could hear was her own frantic pulse, and the echoes of the fight behind her. She could only hope that she was choosing the right road this time, because the night was far from over and the true danger was just beginning to reveal itself. Would there be a safe place waiting for her, or was she running towards a deeper trap? The hope of escape waged war against the fear threatening to consume her. The corridor stretched out in front of her, dim and filled with a haunting silence, a stark contrast to the chaos she had just escaped. The shadows seemed to reach for her, twisting into grotesque shapes that mirrored her worst fears. Every creak of the floorboards beneath her trembling feet sent shivers racing up her spine. "What am I running from?" she whispered to herself, her voice barely breaking the silence. The thought of the man in black confronting the attackers pierced her chest with a fresh wave of panic. What if he didn't make it? What if she had just thrown away her only chance for safety? The thoughts tumbled over one another, threatening to drown her in despair. No! Focus! She glanced back towards the room, the sounds of struggle fading behind the heavy door as she pressed forward. The key felt heavier in her pocket, like a ticking bomb waiting to go off. What was it meant to unlock? She didn't even know what secrets lay ahead, but she had no choice but to keep moving. With every heartbeat echoing in her ears, she forced herself onward, driven by something primal, a desperate desire to survive. As she rounded a corner, her foot caught on something solid and she stumbled, hitting the ground hard. Pain shot through her ankle, a reminder of her injury, but she bit her lip, muffling the cry that threatened to escape. Gritting her teeth, she forced herself back up, her eyes scanning the darkness for any lurking threats. Beyond her own racing thoughts, she began to hear sounds, a muffled voice, low and angry, mixed with the sound of something metallic clattering. They were still pursuing her. The girl's breath quickened, and she fought the paralyzing urge to hide. She needed to keep moving. Hiding would only draw them closer. Further down the corridor, she spotted a small window, its dusty pane barely illuminated by the moonlight creeping across the floor. Heart pounding, she made her way toward it, limping slightly as she pushed through the pane. She had to reach that window. Outside, the sky was a deep navy blue, dotted with stars, but the streets below seemed eerily empty. She hesitated, the memory of the chaos behind her creeping back in. Would going outside be better or worse? She had to take the chance. Rushing to the window, she attempted to pry it open, the rusted hinges protesting loudly as she fumbled with the latch. The noise muted her every thought, drowning out her sense of urgency. "Come on, come on!" she pleaded under her breath, desperation coloring her voice. Just as she finally tore the window open, she heard the sound of heavy footsteps approaching fast. Panic surged. She could practically feel the heat of their breath on her neck. With a force fueled by adrenaline, she climbed through the opening and tumbled outside, landing awkwardly on the pavement. The cold night air hit her like a slap across the face. Breathless but determined, she pushed herself to her feet and looked around. The street was dark and silent, but a sense of freedom filled her lungs. The escape felt thrilling, yet terrifying. She could hear faint whispers behind her, a voice, angry and demanding. They were close. Just ahead, she spotted an alleyway and darted toward it, trying to find some cover. But she was far from safe. She slipped into the shadows, trying to catch her breath, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. The sound of footsteps echoed louder now, mingled with shouts that brought her stomach to knots. "Find her!" "She went this way!" a gruff voice yelled, cutting through the night air. Her heart sank. The chase wasn't over. She pressed her back against the damp brick wall, squeezing her eyes shut for a moment. The fear of the unknown gripped her tight. What were they after? What did the key mean? "Please not again," she whispered, the words trembling on her lips. Suddenly, she heard a scuffle in the shadows behind her. Her eyes shot open, fear pooling in her gut. She turned slowly, bracing for confrontation. But instead, as the moonlight spilled into the alley, revealing a figure silhouetted just a few feet away, her breath caught in her throat for a split second. She thought she had found salvation. But as the figure stepped forward, she realized, with horror, that it was not safety she had found, but something much darker. In that moment, Everything blurred, and dread closed in around her. Would she run again, or this time, face whatever fate awaited her? Before she could decide, another voice echoed from the opposite side of the alley. There she is! Her heart raced as she realized would she make it out alive, or was this another dead end? The walls felt like they were slowly closing in, and it was either fight or flight now. The figure stepped closer, details sharpened in the moonlight. It was a man, tall and menacing, with a glint in his eyes that sent a wave of dread crashing over her. He wore a dark coat that blended seamlessly with the shadows. Look what we have here, he said, voice low and taunting, sending chills through her body. The alley felt smaller, the oppressive darkness wrapping around her like a suffocating blanket. She didn't respond. Instead, she spun around, heart pounding in her ears. The other voice, much closer now, echoed behind her. Panic clawed at her throat. She needed a way out, but this alley was a dead end. Where do you think you're going? The man sneered, stepping forward. She could see the sharp edge of a blade glimmering in his hand. You should have stayed put, he added, taking another step, corners of his mouth curling into a smirk. Her mind raced. The key felt like molten lead in her pocket. Could it unlock an escape route, or just lead to more trouble? She could hear the shouts growing louder. There she is! Don't let her get away! Desperation surged through her. With no time to think, she took a deep breath, forcing her body into motion. Instinct drove her, and she sprinted back toward the entrance of the alley. She could hear the man behind her, footsteps pounding after her, but she pushed harder. Just as she reached the alley's mouth, she collided with something solid. A wall? No, it was another man, this one even broader than the last, blocking her escape. His expression was as cold as steel, eyes narrowing as he took in her wild, frantic look. Got you now, he growled, grabbing her arm. With a surge of adrenaline, she twisted free and darted around him. The open street loomed ahead, but would it be freedom or a trap? She didn't have the time to think about it. Stop her! The first man shouted, his voice a vicious whip that cracked through the night. The street was quieter than it had been, but shadows seemed to lurk in every corner. She broke free of the alley's confines, feeling the cool night air fill her lungs like a life raft. But there was no safety to be found. Just when she thought she could escape into the darkness, a flash of light caught her eye. A car, headlights blazing, pulling up just a few feet away. Her heart fluttered. Get in! Shouted a woman leaning out of the passenger window, urgency spilling from her voice. It was her only shot. With no time to question, she plunged forward, yanking the door open. The woman inside reached out, grabbing her arm, pulling her into the vehicle as she heard footsteps closing in behind her. But as the door slammed closed, she realized the danger wasn't over. The car started moving, but she could feel the palpable tension in the air. The driver glanced nervously in the rearview mirror. Did they follow? He asked, eyes wide, knuckles white on the steering wheel. She turned, heart racing. A figure was in the shadows, and it wasn't just any figure. It was the man in black, watching, a sinister smile spreading across his face like a dawn that heralded disaster. What do you mean? Who were they? She gasped, her voice thin with terror. The driver's expression shifted from worry to grim determination. There's no time to explain, he said fiercely. But they won't stop. They'll hunt you for that key. The reality of her situation crashed down on her. Who was she running from? What were they after? And what lay ahead in this treacherous race against fate? As the car sped away from the alley, a chill swept over her. She knew this was only the beginning. And what she didn't know, what she had yet to discover, would change everything. Hang on, the driver warned, as they approached a sharp turn. We're not out of this yet. What would they face next? She could feel a storm brewing, an unseen force that would threaten to unravel everything. The car whipped around the turn, tires screeching against the asphalt. Her heart leapt into her throat. The night blurred outside the window as they sped past flickers of streetlights, mere ghosts in the dark. Who are you? She stammered, glancing between her rescuers. The driver, a fierce-looking man with a buzz cut, kept his eyes fixed on the road. The woman beside her, with fire engine red hair and sharp features, remained tense, scanning their surroundings. "We're friends, but we have to move fast," the woman said, her voice a fierce whisper, almost drowned by the roar of the engine. "They'll track you down, and they want to be gentle." "Why me? What's so special about the key?" Frustration bubbled in her chest, mingling with fear. "Everything," the driver spat out. "That key, it unlocks power, something they've chased for years. You've put a target on your back." As the realization settled, a cold sweat broke over her. It wasn't just an ordinary key. It was a token of a battle far bigger than she could ever understand. "What do you mean, power?" she asked, desperate for answers that eluded her. "Not now," he barked, cutting her off. "We're not safe yet." Fingers trembling, she reached into her pocket, grasping the key that felt so heavy now. How had it found its way to her? And why did it matter? A series of rapid beeps filled the car, making her jump. The woman next to her punched a button on her phone, glancing urgently at the screen. "They're tracking our location," she said, eyes narrowing. "We need to ditch the car." "Where do we go?" Panic raced through her. The city felt like a labyrinth of dangers closing in around them. "There's a safe house a few blocks away," the driver replied. "But we'll have to ditch this car. They can trace it." Before she could make sense of anything, he flipped the wheel sharply and shoved the car into a narrow alley. The tires squealed as he jammed on the brakes. "Out. Now!" he commanded. Hard hammering, she lunged for the door, followed closely by the other two. Her feet hit the ground hard, and adrenaline surged again. They ran, weaving through the dimly lit alleyways, every shadow feeling alive with menace. Behind them, she heard distant shouts, like hounds on a scent. "Over here!" the woman shouted suddenly, pulling her into a doorway just as they heard footsteps thudding closer. They stood freezing, breaths shallow, hearts racing, and waited. The darkness wrapped around them, unyielding, and she could almost smell the fear in the air. "Why are they after me?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Because of the key," the woman said softly. "It's connected to something ancient. I wish I could say more, but we don't have the luxury of time." A loud crash echoed from the street. The driver's hand darted to his waistband, pulling out a sleek firearm. "Stay quiet," he hissed. Outside, the footsteps grew nearer, purposefully calculated. They could be anywhere, shadowed figures searching for prey. The woman's breath came out in jagged gasps. "They're relentless. We can't let them catch us." "What if they do?" A lump formed in her throat, the weight of dread squeezing her chest. "Then we lose everything," the driver said, his voice steady, but a flicker of fear ignited in his eyes. "We can't let that happen." A silence thickened the air, each second stretching painfully. Outside, a shadow loomed beneath the doorway. "Please tell me we have a plan," she said through gritted teeth. But just when she thought they might be discovered, the driver ducked his head, motioning them to do the same. "On 3, we bolt for the next cover. Ready?" Her heart pounded in her ears, every fiber of her being cried out for survival. 1, 2, they held their breath, waiting for the moment to shatter the stillness. 3! As they burst forth into the night, the chaos around them unfolded, and the hunt transformed into something even more dangerous. What would they find waiting for them in the shadows? The night had been a wild whirlwind, a breakneck race through darkness. But now, amidst the chaos, something shifted. The girl felt the weight of fear in her chest. Pounding footsteps echoed behind her, a relentless reminder that the danger was very real, very close. As they dashed through the alley, the driver led the way, eyes sharp, adrenaline shining in their urgency. "This way!" he shouted, yanking them into a narrow gap between two buildings. The flickering neon lights from a nearby bar illuminated their path just enough to keep pushing forward. "What's next?" she gasped, breathless and terrified. The key in her pocket felt like a lead weight, a reminder of the threat looming over them. "We need to reach the safe house," the woman panted, her worry evident. "It's our only chance to regroup." They paused briefly, hearts racing. Shadows flitted by, the sounds of pursuit closing in. We can lose them in the next block. Trust me. The driver glanced back anxiously, urgency etched across his face, as if the moment only hung by a thread. With feverish determination, they rushed ahead, rounding the corner and racing towards a battered door that the woman pointed to. She reached for the handle, pushing it open just as the sirens of the night drew closer and closer. Inside, they were engulfed in darkness, the smell of wood and mildew wrapping around them. It was a stark contrast to the chaos outside, and for a brief moment, peace washed over her. But it was short-lived. The shouts grew louder, they were closing in. Search the perimeter, a voice barked from outside. The girl felt her heart seize, panic racing through her veins. What do we do? What if they find us here? The woman pulled her close, urgency flashing in her eyes. Listen. We have to hide. They must not find you. You have the key and they'll stop at nothing. Why me? She was fighting off tears, confusion mixing with a deep sense of dread. What's the key for? The driver, scanning the room for any potential escape routes, huffed. It's tied to something bigger than all this, an ancient power. We believe it can shift the balance between those who protect and those who would seek it for chaos. The girl felt the gravity of his words, but the reality of her situation pressed harder against her chest. What do I do? I didn't ask for any of this. Everything will become clear soon, the woman replied, gripping the girl's shoulders. But first, we survive this. Please. Stay calm. Suddenly, a heavy thud resounded against the door, shaking it on its hinges. They're here. The driver's voice lowered to a hiss. We need to move now. He motioned for them to slip deeper into the shadowy recesses of the room. She stumbled into a small storage closet, squeezing in beside old crates and dusty supplies. Every second felt like a ticking clock, echoing in her ears with an urgent finality. The door burst open, light flooding the space. Heart racing, she pressed her back against the wall, muscles clenched tight. The silhouettes of masked figures entered, eyes roving through the room. She has to be here. One snarled, anger dripping from his every word. Search everywhere. Another command, cold and cutting. They moved with purpose, their presence suffocating. The girl shut her eyes tight, the pounding of her heart overpowering all else. Cloaked in fear, she held onto the key, its cold metal a strange comfort in this sea of chaos. It was her tether to any hope they had left. Minutes felt like lifetimes, anxiety clawing at her throat. A voice broke through the murmur, loud and commanding. It was the man in black from before, the one who had tried to help her. You're wasting your time, he shouted. She's not here. Confusion mixed with hope. Was he trying to protect her? The masked figures hesitated, glancing at each other. It was a moment of uncertainty, one that stretched painfully through the room. Would they believe him? Would they just leave? Then, suddenly, a loud crash, drawing all attention. Confusion erupted. The figures turned to rush out, and in their distraction, the driver grabbed the woman's arm, pulling her close. Now! We have to move! Pushing through the door, the trio rushed into the hallway, fear propelling them forward. The sounds of chaos resumed behind them, but this time it felt like a chance. Just a little further, the woman urged, guiding them towards another exit. A glimmer of hope ignited in the girl's heart. They could escape this nightmare. Bursting through yet another door, they emerged onto a darkened street bathed in moonlight. The way ahead looked promising, a chance at freedom. Just then, she turned back, her heart heavy. What about? But before she could finish, the man in black met her gaze, sincerity gleaming like a beacon. Go. I won't let them take you. Torn between gratitude and worry, she sprinted forward, suddenly filled with determination. This wasn't just about survival, it was about reclaiming her own voice, her own heart, and fighting back against the darkness threatening to swallow her whole. The key pulsed in her pocket, now bursting with promise. She felt the thrill of possibility, daring to hope as she and her newfound allies sped into the open street, the night wrapping around them like a shroud. They were just starting to turn the tide, and she wouldn't back down now. As the sirens faded, leaving only the hum of the city, she whispered, "This isn't over. Not for me. The chase may not be over, but neither was her fight." She'd find out what the key meant, and she would discover the truth of who she really was. Her heart raced with newfound courage, and beneath the weight of the night, she felt alive. Time to reclaim her fate. Now, it's your turn. You need to subscribe now to follow this relentless journey and discover what happens next. Smash that like button now to show your support. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories. We want to know what you think about this conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this gripping finale. Your support means everything. Let us keep the story alive together.